It's Berlin briefing time. Today we ask whether Germany and Europe will stand up to big tech and the algorithms that they are designing. Just after the current government came into office just over a year ago, German Chancellor Merz labeled the question of big tech regulation and taxation a question of Europe's sovereignty. Now, the Pope just told politicians to get a grip on AI and big tech or lose their grip on keeping societies humane. So let's take stock how the German government is performing on the digital front. And with me to lend me their expertise are Professor Dr. Matthias Kettemann from the Leibniz Institute for Media Research. He's a legal expert on AI and big tech regulation. And with me in the studio is DW's very own digital tech policy correspondent, Maximiliane Koschyk. She closely monitors and analyzes all things digital while maintaining the best thing about her, being real. So, Matthias, first of all, coming to you, I just want to check in with you. What difference can the word and the call of a pope make to the entire debate about regulation of AI and big tech?
Well, quite obviously, the Pope is a moral authority, and we can trust him to be not very self-interest. He doesn't have AI. He doesn't own companies. The Vatican is really an actor that we can trust to have the interests of humanity in mind. That is exactly what we see in his encyclica. We see an approach that promotes a human being-oriented approach to technology, but that also takes up a lot of the legal aspects that European Union legislation and the German government's priorities also combine.
Now, can you just give us an overview? Because there is a lot of different legislation, the Digital Services Act, the Digital Data Protection Regulation. There's a whole host of legislation we can go through, but how much of this is actually having an impact on what you and I get to see, get to do, how we get influenced when we go online and onto those platforms?
So the good news is that we don't notice most of it, because good regulation, good legislation helps make your life easier without you actually noticing it. How often have you thought about, why, cars don't always crash into each other? They don't, because people, stick with the rules of the road. And the same goes for the internet. As long as everything is working, that's perfect, that's fine. That's because we have rules that are applied. Specifically regarding the digital world, our data is protected because of European data protection rules. Bad content is deleted online because of the obligations of the DSC. We have now more rights in apps, to get cheaper options to have our to buy within the different apps because of the Digital Markets Act. Amazon stops discriminating against other companies within its own market because of the Digital Markets Act. Everything is a bit fairer now because of the Digital Fairness Act. So we're seeing the impact of European legislation in the digital field in so many different ways. We have it so much better than in other regions of the world.
Now, of course, we're seeing two things happening in parallel. First of all, there's the technological race that is also about who will define public space and communication and debate in the future. And then there is the corporate interest. I just want to take a look at that tweet we saw from J.D. Vance, the US vice president, just before a ruling came out where X, the platform X, was in the end found guilty of not having been transparent enough, according to that legislation that you just cited, and having to pay $120 million. Now, J.D. Vance called that stupid regulation. He was trying to influence that. He says that the EU should be supporting free speech, not attacking American companies over what he called garbage. Let me just take this to you, Max, because we saw Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, very early on declare this an issue of national sovereignty. And we're just going to take a listen to that clip.
I have already told the American president this, and I would like to repeat it here. The question of how the European Union regulates the entire digital market and how it taxes companies is a matter of the European Union's sole sovereignty. We will not tolerate anyone pressuring Europe with reprisals.
So, since that, we saw a digital sovereignty summit between Germany and France on this. But how does this comment sound just a year on?
Well, he's changed his tune a bit, Friedrich Merz. A month ago here in Hanover at a very big tech conference, Friedrich Merz was actually saying he wants to remove the sort of restrictive corset of EU regulation. This was in the context of AI. But he's in a bit of a tough spot here to kind of, on the one hand, he has to make a choice here between either trying to sort of like be more stern on regulation, but that would put him on the back foot when it comes to tech innovation in Germany. And you can see that in that mixed messaging he's giving, on the one hand trying to stand up to Donald Trump, the US president, and on the other hand trying to promise German tech and industries to be more open and less restrictive when it comes to regulation so that they have more scope to actually progress.
And I was actually in the room at the Hanover Fair. It's a big industrial fair, and it was very much about German prosperity and about getting the German economy going again, which has just seen some bleak figures come out once again. There's this concern about losing that race to actually catch up with the US and with China. And at the same time, his state secretary for the media here in Germany became more specific once again on that very pledge. Let's just take a listen to that.
We should shape the new AVMSD directive in such a way that big tech companies finally compete fairly with our media, put an end to the systematic disregard for copyright, and strengthen the DSM. We should force the AI industry's large language models to be transparent and have antitrust authorities closely monitor the situation if monopolies and cartels solidify.
So, Matthias, and I want to take this comment to you and what seems like very different voices within the same government saying that they want to achieve the very same thing. You've seen governments come and go over this very issue as well. Can you put some sense into this? What kind of outcome do you expect, and when do you expect to see some movement on this here in Germany in particular?
So taxes have always been a huge issue. Platforms and tech companies more generally have not been paying their fair share, not in Germany, not in Europe, and not globally. So it's an excellent approach by Germany to move on that issue. It's good also to put more pressure on European stakeholders to have a more fair taxation approach to the big companies that make so much money and that offload societal costs, social costs towards the states and towards the community. So it's a good idea to follow up on that. Transparency is also an essential issue. We need to know much more about how those platforms program their algorithms, what they optimize their algorithms for, how they engage with illegal content and problematic content. For that area, we have some good legislation. We have the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, especially the DSA, which I mentioned before, is helping a lot because it forces platforms to open up their inner workings to researchers. It forces them to show what their goals are, what they optimize their algorithms for, and thus how we can better prepare societies for the way that communication changes in times of digitalization.
Now, this is certainly an aim that also very much comes through in what we heard from the Pope. I guess if you ask politicians, they would like to see that as an outcome. At the same time, major investment is needed into data centers, also to be part of this race, to really be at the cutting edge of this new technology. And then there is, of course, the political pressure that we saw in the case of X from J.D. Vance, the US vice president. There is an interest in the US not to have a tight regulation here in Europe. So how important is Germany's role here to go into some kind of leadership role?
Well, Germany is an essential country within the European Union. Together with France, it is a powerhouse when it comes to digital. From 2017, we were actually the first country in the world to have a precursor to what is now the Digital Services Act. Germany's approach to digital regulation, therefore, is widely seen and widely heard. And as an economic powerhouse as well, Germany's voice is very important in the debate on making online companies pay their fair share.
So, Max, do you get a sense that there will be fast movement on this here in Berlin? Will action follow those words?
I don't think so. I think, as I said, there's a lot of contradiction still within the German government of how they want to approach it. We heard the German culture minister, Wolfram Weimar, he's very vocal on these promises of what needs to be done. But then the German government struggles a bit to put these things into action, especially the things they wrote into the coalition agreement, including the digital media levy that they want to impose, which is a tax suggestion where they're saying we have a lot of revenue being generated by big tech here in Germany from Google and Meta. Almost 50% of the sort of media ad revenue is going to these two big companies from Germany. And if we tax them, then we're going to get a piece of that cake. And that's something they propose to do, and they can't actually get it through because it's the kind of legislation that you would need to align with European law. And so we're currently in this limbo where Germany does want to do on some occasions things to improve regulation, to improve customer rights, to increase German and European sovereignty, but they're doing it somewhat ill-timed because the European Union is doing their own kind of legislation packs. You've talked about a couple that have been issued, and there Germany's hesitant to implement them. So Germany is hesitant to implement the European AI Act because they say it's stifling their innovation and their tech progress. And the ones that Germany proposes themselves, like the digital levy, that one's actually would need to go through Brussels, and it would be at the very back end of what Brussels is trying to do on its own. So Germany's, or at least the current government, is not that savvy when it comes to really playing the political game of getting both a regulation done and getting more sort of savvy and agile when it comes to innovation and tech.
Yeah, Matthias, how united are European countries on where they want to take this?
So European countries have their own special interests. So, for example, Ireland doesn't really want to talk about taxing and taxes. They have done a horrible job in enforcing European tax law. They've also, by the way, done a horrible job in enforcing data protection law, for which they're also responsible, because the majority of companies sits in Dublin. They don't have an interest to do that. That's very unfortunate. France has been less strong than before, and the UK, obviously, after the Brexit, is no longer with us in terms of policy pressure that can be exerted. So Germany is, together with perhaps Austria and partially Denmark and Sweden, so one of the few countries that actually very strongly pushes for stronger digital regulation. But as your colleague has said, not always with the same voice internally and within Europe.
Is it really such a binary competition between economic interests and actually catching up technologically and actually doing the right thing, as many politicians here feel, which is having not just those taxes, but also forcing more transparency into what is otherwise a black box for consumers?
So I think that especially the AI Act helps us a lot here because it forces platforms and AI providers and deployers to tell us much more about the inner workings of their systems and models, how they are trained, how they have been developed, how they're used. So I think that knowing more about how AI is used and what impact it has on our daily lives, what decisions are taking with AI, how humans are included in decision-making loops within AI systems is one of the key issues of our time. If people have the feeling that they no longer know, how their rights are being respected by online processes and where AI plays a role, then this decreases their trust, and this in turn decreases societal resilience. So opening up those black boxes is essential, and that's what the AI Act is for, which therefore needs to be urgently implemented and not what's currently en vogue in Brussels, redoing it and renewing it and changing it even before it's actually enforced through a system called digital omnibus bills and AI omnibus bills.
What kind of impact did that ruling against X have, where it had to pay up? And also, do you feel that this whole question of regulation is currently something that is very much part of a package of overall trade negotiations?
So it's difficult to say specifically what impact this judgment has had, because those companies are rich, a couple of millions here and there doesn't actually hurt them. It's really more about showing that they've done something wrong and acknowledging that. So this is a moral question that's also discussed and performed in a certain way by each of those judgments. At the same time, if companies, and a lot of them do, cooperate with Commission authorities, then those processes make a lot of sense. TikTok, for example, they didn't wait for a penalty. No, the first time that the Commission said that they weren't doing enough to protect kids, they started to do a bit more, right? So those processes aren't meant to be just looking at the penalty. The Commission cooperates to make Europeans feel safer again online and to protect their rights better. X isn't cooperating at all. It's kind of the Reichsbürger of the social media companies, one could say.
Yes, and in fact, many public broadcasts have withdrawn from X as well as a forum. But looking at the bigger context, Maximiliane, we know that this working group is now sitting together. What's the makeup of this working group that will lay proposals on the table? And what kind of a timeline are you expecting to see here for Germany to actually come up with something it wants to take to Brussels as well?
Yeah, and let's step a bit back here because not maybe everybody knows what the working group is we're talking about. So last year, the German Chancellor instituted a strategic circle for tech and innovation. It was his sort of big answer to how his government should tackle these issues. He was sort of taking inspiration from what France is doing with a sort of similar committee. And the US has a big, strong tech innovation committee that sort of is a body that's very strongly sort of emboldened by the government to help make these decisions. And sort of the claim of what Germany wants to do with this strategic circle is to sort of really take the questions of tech innovation and turn them into economic strategy, to sort of have that kind of lever to get ahead. What's currently happening is that this committee or this circle is mostly consistent of people from the industry. So in that sense, it's good. It's sort of close to the base of what they're trying to change, but it doesn't have much more of sort of heft to it. So when you talk about sort of the question of regulation and sort of how Germany should conduct itself in terms of the issues between innovation and regulation, then that wouldn't be solved by that circle because it's only representing the tech side. It's not representing the more regulatory instances, including sort of, unions or other bodies that would be able to sort of help be vocal on the regulatory side. Regulatory side. And so the circle now met a couple of times. Most notably, they have been behind a push to merge the conversation on AI and defense. So this is something that's been on the agenda of the German defense minister, who's, helped support the Ukrainian efforts to get unmanned and automized weapons into the war they have with Russia. And so that's something that's been on their agenda, which tells you a bit about sort of where Germany sees, sort of the use of tech in its current political climate, where it's looking a lot at defense industries. And so that's sort of something they did. But otherwise, they haven't delivered much, right? So they're meant to deliver these sort of big strategic angles. And what they're doing is more sort of piggybacking on what is already being done in terms of sort of tech initiatives. So they work closely together with the digital ministry. And some of the initiatives that have come from that ministry have been then sort of ushered or sort of supported by the circle. But we haven't seen anything that goes into the direction of what they were meant to be doing, like really shape economic strategy and help Germany solve that question of, are we going to be a regulatory sort of enforcer for Europe and the world and push for sovereignty, or are we going to try to catch up with that race of trying to be a technical, like sort of innovative country?
Yes, and I want to take that to you, Matthias, because can Germany have it all? Can it have both? Can it be part of this industry and attract the investment also from the big tech companies, and at the same time have the kind of regulation that, according to also the coalition agreement here, the government is actually aiming for?
I think Germany is finding a good balance if it combines good regulation with an attractive environment. The environment to do business isn't attractive because we don't have digital rules, but it's attractive because we have great human potential. We have intelligent people. They're great at what they do. So I think Germany should rather leverage that. Not be happy if companies come because of fewer rules, but rather come because of great people and the potential to invest in a place where a lot of innovation is actually happening. Europe and Germany hasn't done a great job in attracting companies regarding digital and AI innovation in the last couple of years, but perhaps this is going to change with a more clearer set of rules, which has been delivered in the past by the EU.
Now, there was one concrete example given here by the State Secretary for Media, and he is worried about that regional papers could be dying out. We saw this happen in the United States. It's seen actually as the cardinal sin behind a lot of the kind of mainstream MAGA movement that no longer felt that politics is actually serving people well, and this information gap was actually well documented. So I'm just wondering, do you think that that is a key to have a healthy democratic debate here in Europe?
Definitely. Local newspapers, regional news are extremely important to furthering social cohesion and societal resilience. If people feel heard, they feel connected, and that starts, with questions like who is, picking up the garbage, and what are we going to do with our local swimming pool? Those are essential questions. And local journalists need support both from governmental sources and from AI. There have been a number of interesting examples to show that AI in local newsrooms, can help alleviate burdens and can lead to some level of foundational information, which is, I think, one tech opportunity we should look into more deeply. But yes, local newspapers are essential to ensure that people feel heard and seen.
Maximiliane, I just want to kind of ask you, what for you is the big test on how serious this government is about finding the kind of regulation and actually getting it going that they promised in their own agreement?
I think they need to pick a direction first. What do they want to do? What is going to be their big goal here? In how are they going to position themselves against big tech? Is it going to be that they're trying to play a game of catch up? Are they going to go down the collaborative road, which they've done in some cases, where they've built this big gigafactory with Nvidia and in Munich now, so there is like some kind of collaboration happening
in chip manufacturing,
which is essential for any kind of tech development, especially in the case of AI. So that's the kind of stuff where Germany is trying to push forward. And then on the other hand, it is part of the European Union, which is pushing for more sovereignty through regulation. And Germany needs to decide which part is it going to play here. There is, as I said earlier, there's a lot of mixed messaging when it comes to, are they going to sort of put themselves firmly on the side of the EU, or are they going to backtrack some of their statements, which they did when it came to implementing the EU legislation and saying, oh no, it's actually hindering our own economic growth and our own tech innovation.
And we will take a much closer look at what the internal German debate is on that. And with that, I unfortunately have to let Matthias Kettemann go, because I learned that you need to go and catch a train, which is actually on time. So thank you very much for your analysis on this very topical issue that is being so hotly debated here in Germany. And Maximiliane, let's just take this one step back to the beginning, because how much of an impact do you expect this papal voice in this debate, with the Pope now calling on the politicians to live up to their responsibility and to put a stop sign to the unhindered development AI and big tech have here in Germany?
Yeah, let's take a bit of a step back. So earlier this week, when Pope Leo published an encyclical, papal sort of
his
doctrine,
first one, so it's a major historic one already, yes.
His first one, also, it was timed very historically to be 135 years after the one of his predecessor, the first Leo. So he's kind of trying to sort of be in a tradition here of like what popes do. They sort of give insight and thought on how to tackle big topics. And the first one, 135 years ago, not the first one, but the one that he took sort of inspiration from, that one was published at the sort of helm of the Industrial Revolution. And so the idea is with his, which tackles AI and how we should tackle AI, is to sort of like compare it a bit in the sense, okay, there's a big technology that's shifting how societies operate, and here's the answer by the Vatican on how to handle it. And the big TLDR of it is regulation. It's that through regulation, through oversight outside of tech industries, societies can stay humane, as you put it, and societies will have that sort of safeguarding that keeps sort of them out of sort of the hands of big tech, which often operate on incentives that are not necessarily good. You know, he's not saying that technology or AI is evil, but he says the incentives by which they operate are not necessarily good, and it's the role of society, and in his case, the church, to kind of make sure that they are. And so he's
very specific. He speaks about the division in society. He's worried about democracy as well.
Does.
These are all the issues that we've been debating, actually.
He does, and it's, you know, it's rare that I read such a sort of clerical text, but I looked at it and also spoke to our colleague who's you know covering religious affairs, and we both sort of looked at it, and it was interesting because, you know, Leo the Pope has a scientific background. You know, he's American. He's American,
yeah.
So he definitely knows what he's talking about. Our colleague puts it as I want to quote him because it was such a brilliant line. He said, you know, he knows his zeros and ones. He knows his binary code. This is a man who's dabbled with science before he went to work and get a career in the church. And so
shout out to Christoph Streck.
Shout out to Christoph.
Yeah.
And so he's addressing, on the one hand, obviously his American fellows in terms of the government. He's addressing sort of the US government, who's been very anti-regulatory. He's also addressing big tech in Silicon Valley specifically. So Christoph, since we've already name dropped him, we talked about how one of the priests who was actually in the parish of Silicon Valley was very influential in getting this publication done. So this is really targeting sort of the conversations that we just had about sort of that are currently being had in Brussels and Berlin here on tech regulation. This was the conversation that happened in Rome, and in Rome with Silicon Valley, and that's a product. And I think what's important or interesting about it is, when we look at our government, when we look back here in Berlin, you know, how could this resonate? This should be very important to a government where the leading party has the C for Christianity in their leading title. And what we're getting in Berlin right now is crickets. We're not hearing anything on this matter. So you would think that a German government led by a Christian sort of nominal party would sort of somewhat respond to it. Might be that that's still happening. You know, you were saying in prep for this that Merz is currently busy and might not have done any sort of public statements on this. But the vice president, J.D. Vance, already responded and saying it's a very insightful text, you know. So it's a bit surprising that German...
Well, he didn't leap at the chance to comment on this. So he clearly wasn't waiting on it.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's the Christian Democratic Union of Friedrich Merz, his own party, which is in a union with the Christian Social Union of Bavaria, together with the Social Democrat Party. And his vice-chancellor is also the finance minister, Lars Klingbeil, from the Social Democrats. He's the co-leader of the Social Democrats. And let's just take a listen what he had to say about this.
I believe that the tech bros in the US, who not only wield incredible economic but also immense political power, that Europe, the European Commission, and the European Union is being specifically targeted because all these tech bros know that Europe is perhaps the only entity aside from the US, that can effectively regulate them politically. And this is a battle we must now fight, and I want to tell you that I'm in favor of us going on the offensive here.
So this is what he told our bureau chief, Max Hoffmann, when he asked him about this very development and how interested this coalition is to take this regulation forward. So there doesn't seem to be a problem in moving fast.
Yeah. So Lars Klingbeil, the finance minister, he has been vocal on this matter. The tech bro quote that we've just heard is a very clear example of him sort of saying, we cannot let them do whatever they want. He's also been very vocal against Peter Thiel. He doesn't want his influence in Europe. He's been going on the record for that. But
billionaire tech
owner, founder of Palantir, big AI software company. And Lars Klingbeil does that, but similar to Friedrich Merz. So in one sense, the German coalition leaders are very unison, which is sort of that they love a bit of ambivalent messaging here. So they do this, but then on the other hand, as was just transpired through a media report by a German media organization here yesterday, the Green Party, the opposition party in the German government, had put a request to the German government, the opposition party in German parliament, sorry, they had put a request to the German government wanting to know about access that the OpenAI founder Sam Altman had to the government. And so what transpired in this media report that was based on that inquiry is that both Lars Klingbeil, who we just heard, and Friedrich Merz met with the OpenAI founder Sam Altman over the course of the last years. In total, Sam Altman met 5 times with members of the German government. And this was, as far as sort of it has been made public, it was always at the behest of OpenAI. So this wasn't the German government going to Silicon Valley and asking to speak to tech founders, which sometimes, government members do because it's insightful, it's kind of getting connections. In this case, the company came to Berlin and wanted to talk to the German government, and they said yes. So that's the report. And this tells us that Lars Klingbeil does talk to tech bros. He's not averse to tech bros. He's just not maybe as sort of stringent or sort of kind of consistent in his messaging and in his actions as he maybe should be. And this comes back to what I said earlier. Germany has to choose a direction here. It has a tough choice. It's a bit of a choice between a hard place and a rock. They have to choose, are they trying to pick a battle with big tech, with the US, which is a very pro-tech government, on regulation, and that might be a battle they will lose.
And I think it's also the point to mention that US President Donald Trump then in the end didn't sign a presidential order just a couple of days ago, which would have given more guardrails on the development of AI. So he is driven by the concern that there might be too much regulation.
Exactly.
And here in Germany, it's a debate and also kind of a political game. How far can we take this regulation without hampering our own opportunities for development, also being part of this market and potentially facing other repercussions, which the government and Europe does protest a bit too much. It would be that it would be impressed by that.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's the hard place. Are you choosing a battle that you may not win that has serious repercussions economically? Or are you trying to enter a race on tech innovation and on economic sort of growth that Germany desperately needs, where you're so lagging behind that you may never catch up? That's the other part. And the third part could be taking the Pope's sort of suggestion and say, okay, we're going to become a beacon of ethical AI. We're going to become a beacon of sort of how can we do this properly? It would actually be in the tradition of the German governing parties. If you look closely, the papal encyclical is or could be a blueprint for how the SPD and the CDU-CSU could tackle AI in tech. It could be in the tradition of what they should be doing. The way they're acting or the way their actions currently suggest where they want to go is far away from it. It's more liberal democratic. It's as we said, it's very sort of shying away from regulation, shying away from sort of like a more profound, ethically driven approach to tech. And that's sort of the big issue Germany has, sort of like they can't pick a lane, but they have to.
And that's actually the thought and the status where we are that I want to leave all of us with, because this may be the first time that we spoke about this here on Berlin Briefing, but it certainly isn't the last, because we will for sure keep a very close track, also thanks to you, on this very issue, on the political debate, but also what moves in terms of regulation, both here in Germany and within the European Union. And for all of you listening and watching, to Maximiliane and myself, and also to the other episodes, do drop us your questions, what you would like us to zoom in on. Do get up to date with the Berlin Briefing newsletter, which you can sign up to below as well. And let us know whether you feel there's a whole area that we haven't had on our radar so far, that we should be looking a lot more at, and should be taking a much closer look at for you. So far, we've been pretty good in catching up to you with your requests and actually getting those political voices here also from the Berlin bubble for you. And with that, thanks for listening, and we so look forward to you joining us again next time.